Hello, and welcome to this educational session on HIPAA compliance, which is being presented to you by Misty Kevich and Amy Shortall.
After today's session, the learner will be able to describe the requirements of HIPAA regulations, to also apply those responsibilities related to those requirements, to identify HIPAA breaches that should be reported, and to state how to report a breach. Celtic Healthcare is very committed to protecting the privacy and integrity of our patients' health information. HIPAA privacy rule is recognized as important and valuable to Celtic Healthcare, and we make this strong commitment. Please make sure to review the policies that are on SIP that are related to HIPAA. I think today you could ask almost anybody and ask what is HIPAA, and they would tell you it's all that extra paperwork you have to sign at the doctor's office, the hospitals, and pharmacies. But HIPAA actually stands for Health Information Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, and it began to be enforced in 2003. The regulations are all for hospitals, physicians, and other healthcare providers, including home care.
Thanks, Misty. There have been new regulations posted as of March 2013.
So what does this mean to you and to our patients? The privacy rule gives patients more control over their protected health information, which is known as PHI. So you need to know that the patient's rights regarding their use of PHI, certain terms and general rules that can apply, and when you can and cannot share patient information. And that's what we're going to cover in today's education session. Patients do have rights. It's different than it was a few years back, but they have a right to have their information protected. They can inspect and copy their medical records or their personal health information. They can request to have their records be corrected or changed. They can ask for limits in how that PHI is used or shared. They are asked that they can be contacted in specific ways, such as at work or not at home. Think about what you have to fill out at the doctor's office. Is it okay that they leave messages on your phone? Because anybody could come in and listen to your answering machine. So you have to just make those determinations and be very clear. Also, the patient's right is to get a list of disclosures. Who has been given their personal health information?
Some other rights that patients have under the HIPAA rule are they can get a list of disclosures made of their personal health information. They can revoke authorization for disclosure. And also, they can refuse to let information about an item or service that they pay for in full to be disclosed to their insurance company. So, for example, a patient who might be undergoing experimental treatment for cancer, and they pay out of pocket for that experimental treatment, they do not have to disclose that to their insurance company.
Healthcare providers and health plans must give patients a notice of privacy practices that explains how we're going to protect their PHI, their rights, their responsibilities, and who that they are to contact for more information. We have ours included in our admission packs, as well as it's noted on the consent form. Let's talk about protected health information. It includes any information that is sent or stored in any form. So that can be electronic, it can be paper-based. And this information reveals patient identity or could be used to identify patient's identity. It's created or received by a covered entity, such as our offices, our Celtic offices, or the physician offices, etc. It reveals information about a patient's past, present, and or future treatments and payments of services. Now for use, we're going to talk about how PHI is handled by us, and disclosure is how PHI is shared externally to others. Now let's look at what some of that information could be for PHI. That includes patients' names, which is pretty obvious, address including zip codes, all dates, telephone and fax numbers, email addresses, obviously social security numbers, medical record numbers, health plan numbers, so your Highmark numbers, your Medicare numbers, license numbers, vehicle identification numbers, account numbers, biometric identifiers, full face photos, or any other unique identifying number, characteristic, or code. These are all protected health information. Written permission is not needed by the patient for us to use or share PHI to treat a patient. We can provide information from one setting to another if we're all treating that patient. To get paid for treatment or evaluate the person who provided the treatment, it's called a Treatment, Payment, and Healthcare Operations, or a TPO. Basically what that means is that we don't have to have written permission to bill the insurance company. This is all part of what we're going to get paid for, and we're within the system of caring for that patient. To share PHI with the patient or public health purposes, such as reporting births and deaths, also don't need written permission. For disclosure to our vendors for TPO under a written contract, we do not. So for example, hospice has contracts with DME suppliers, so we're able to disclose that information without having written permission by that patient. There are other key points that are not violations. We can share PHI for our payment activities, as I mentioned on the last slide, and for those of covered entities. We can send a patient's health care plan information to a lab so that the lab can bill for its services. We can report abuse or neglect. For law enforcement, we can provide it, again, without written permission. For organ donation organizations, to medical examiners and funeral directors, and if they're to avoid threats to health and safety, it is not a violation to share PHI.
There might be some other situations that may not be a violation. These situations could include reporting abuse or neglect, law enforcement questions, for organ donation organizations, to medical examiners and funeral directors, and to avoid threats to health and safety. If you have any of these situations, please contact our HIPAA privacy officer for direction.
We need patients' permission or authorization to share PHI with certain marketing and fundraising activities, so that's when we would need written permission.
So what about family members? Can we share information with family members? Well, written permission is not needed if patients want some or all of their personal health information to be used or shared with friends and family members involved with the patient's care or payment. And this can be verbal permission. We do have to document their wishes, though, in our medical record. However, this communication should not include communication via email. Please do not email any personal health information to family members, or for that matter for anybody outside of the Celtic company. Okay, this also includes any information about their condition. I know now in a technological world, family members feel it's easier to communicate via email, but we cannot share any personal health information via email. The privacy statement in our mission booklet states, in order for Celtic Healthcare to provide you the absolute best healthcare possible, we may need to disclose your health information to individuals responsible for your care, including but not limited to your spouse, sibling, son or daughter, other relative, friend, neighbor, power of attorney, or other caregiver. If you do not want your health information disclosed to a specific individual, you, your power of attorney, or whomever you may have designated to make decisions on your behalf may provide your Celtic Healthcare nurse or therapist with the name of the individuals, or you may contact the privacy officer. Those staff members who do admissions should be sharing and reviewing that information with the patient upon admission.
At Celtic, we use the minimum necessary rule. The amount of PHI used, shared, accessed, or requested must be limited to only what is needed. Workers are only to know the PHI that is required to do their job. And you have to remember who you're talking to and people that can overhear you when you're talking about personal health information. This is included in the office as well as out in the patient's home. Good examples about this would be the home health aides might not need the same PHI information that the nurse and the therapist might need, just what we need to do with our care. Same as the social worker. They may have more detailed information that we necessarily need to share with everybody. If it factors into the care that we're providing, then obviously they would. When we talk in the office or at a patient's home, others can overhear easily conversations that we're having. Now, there are times when that minimum necessary rule does not apply. And examples for that would be to disclose patient information. Obviously, we can't hold back information to that patient if they're requesting it. Also, those that are authorized to use for use that are approved by a patient. We can't just pick and choose what we share. When the law is involved, we must also not use the minimum necessary rule. We must share everything.
So it is our responsibility as healthcare workers to protect our patients' health information. How do we do this? First of all, the most important way to protect information is by protecting the information that is on your laptop. Your password should be kept confidential. Never give someone your password so they can log on to your computer. Never write down your password to safeguard people from seeing your password and being able to get on your computer. Frequently change your passwords. And it is a policy of Celtic Healthcare to have our passwords changed every 6 months. Also, too, another important thing you can do is logging off computers for security. Never leave your laptop unattended or unlocked. If you walk away, close the lid, log off, so your information is not seen by other people. Also, very important, no family members, neighbors, or coworkers, except for IT department, are allowed on your computers. All these are ways to protect your patient's health information.
Some additional responsibilities includes faxing. We never fax without a cover sheet because we don't know where the fax might end up going to a wrong number. The cover sheet has specific information about keeping patient information private if it goes to the wrong place. We always use Celtic's cover sheet because of that terminology that is on the cover sheet. Fill out the necessary information and then fax. Additionally, you want to secure patient PHI within your own home. Don't leave it out where others could see it, including your friends and families. Store it in locked cabinets and shred any information about that has PHI on it if you no longer use it. Many people do like to print off a copy of the intake information. There's a lot of PHI that's there. When you're finished with it, it does need to be shredded. Leaving messages on a patient phone is another area you have to be careful with. Only leave the minimum information that's necessary, and any sensitive information should not be used, such as diagnoses and even what the labs are going to be that you're drawing. Fasting labs is different, but if you're going to say you're there for a blood sugar, you are giving sensitive information away. And when in a patient's home, don't bring other patients' PHI into the home. Also, if you receive a phone call from a supervisor or a physician related to a different patient, make sure your computer is locked out and find a secure private area that you can take that phone call, because you could easily pass on information about another patient. Also, if your patient wants to see their documentation, your documentation on them, you need to have that request in writing before they can view it. The PHI is also your responsibility when you have pieces of information in your car. You need to make sure your doors of your vehicle are locked and it and your computer are out of the view of others. You need to ask the patients for their ID to verify their identity at the first visit to make sure that you really are taking care of John Smith or John Doe. If the laptop is lost or stolen, you need to report it to IT immediately, and also an occurrence report needs to occur. That way we have documentation and can track in case somebody does get information from that computer. We may be asked to give an account of who we gave PHI to, so we have to document all of our disclosures. For example, the DME companies, the pharmacies, etc. So when we give information, we must complete a disclosure form so that it's documented. Additional responsibilities includes decreasing the risk of laptop security breaches. You do not open forwards from non-Celtic employees because it could contain a virus or a virus that can extract information. Do not open emails from non-Celtic employees you do not know. Do not email information about a patient to anyone who is not a Celtic employee. And if you email another Celtic employee about a patient, don't use their full name. Use their last name and their ID number. But our email system is a secured system when you're going from a Celtic employee to another Celtic employee. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that a patient has the right to request to have documentation changed or amended. That is a right. We need to email the medical records for information on the process and to receive the request forms for the patient to complete. They're not just publicly accessible for all Celtic employees. This doesn't happen very often, or probably rarely, and we need to make sure we follow a correct policy. So if a patient wants something amended, do contact medical records. HIPAA violations are extremely important and are very serious. There are two different types of violations of privacy policies. One is a technical violation that does not result in disclosure of a PHI, and there are technical violations that do result in disclosure of PHI. And I think we see more of the second, the technical violations, on the news each night, where a bank or a company has accidentally has exposed patients' PHI or their credit card information in that case. Types of violations that involve use and disclosure. There's an unintentional use or disclosure, or an intentional use or disclosure, where we accidentally let information be known to another party, or we intentionally do that. There is protection. There is federal rules and regulations to protect whistleblowers. So if somebody does report a person in our company that is violating HIPAA, they are truly protected. There is severe penalties based upon the type of violation. It is investigated by our management team first. Then there is a review of documentation. They meet with staff member, determine if a real violation did occur, and if action is taken. It could be no action. It could be just to review the policy, a verbal warning, written warning, dismissal, or even legal action. You will want to document investigation and follow up. So when in doubt, always ask if this is a potential PHI violation or a PHI release of information.
If you suspect a possible violation of the HIPAA laws, you must report that violation immediately. Please go to the Celtic Information Portal and complete an employee occurrence report. Also, please email Greg Tiemann, who is our security officer, or Barb Houston, who's our privacy officer, so they can get the investigation underway.
There are consequences, not just for Celtic, but for you as the employee. The new federal regulations state that employees who violate HIPAA laws can now be personally liable, which means that can lead to prison time and fines. There was recently a UCLA employee that had a 3-year prison sentence for having access to someone's personal health information, and they should not have. So we're going to continue to see this expanding over the next several years, but I think we're going to see more and more cases coming to light. Thank you for attending today's session. Remember to review the policy and procedure on HIPAA that's located in Policy and Procedures on the SIP site. There is a post test. Please complete.